Welcome back. I have a few rapid games on chess.com that I need to catch up on, not only for these videos, but for my own analysis. Now, I did a few of them already, the first couple, but those videos didn't work out the way that I had hoped. Technical issues and other distractions, so I'm just going to run through real quick, and I'm only going to hit the points at which game-changing moments, or the game-deciding moments. Hopefully you'll get something out of this, and hopefully I will too. As always, our goal is to get better at chess. That's the whole reason for this channel. This first game is from June 25th, 2023, so a few days ago. I played the Caro-Kann defense, and after 17 moves were in this position, my opponent has just moved over to attack this rook. Stockfish says I should have just moved that pawn forward. Well, that would have protected it, I suppose. The engine even says I'd be fine if I played rook to g8. Well, I thought a different way to protect that pawn would be to move my knight in here to b4, because that attacks their queen. They wouldn't take my pawn while I'm attacking their queen. I also thought this would be a good idea because a knight placed there on b4 would be hitting their a pawn, which would be a check. So depending on where their queen moved, for example, I guess it counts as hope chess, but there was multiple opportunities for them to have moved their queen. For example, if they came here to challenge my queen, I could hop in there and win theirs for my knight if they didn't see that coming. Regardless, I didn't have to worry about the g-pawn while I played my knight there. That was the whole idea of that. They would have to do something with their queen. But that turns out to be an inaccuracy. It doesn't take us too far down. We're still between +1 and -1. They actually have quite a few options to get out of this according to the engine, and they'll be fine in all of them. Queen to e2, queen to d2. The best is queen to b3. And it says in all of those cases, I would play rook to c8. Now see, that's interesting to me. At that point, I would abandon the g-pawn, apparently. It says they wouldn't come after it. But they played the best of those, which was queen to b3. That, of course, protects the a-pawn and keeps me from going that direction with my knight. Now, my opponent has a very slight advantage, and again, rook to c8 is my best move. Giving this up, it says they wouldn't take it. My second best move is to take this undefended pawn here. Well, I did see that undefended pawn, but I also saw that I couldn't move my queen because this knight would be hanging. Now, it says if I went down here, that they wouldn't take my knight. Of course, if they took my knight at that point, I would take their knight. So they would move their knight first. Well, I decided to protect my knight first, so I played this. That turns out to be a mistake because they can play a3, because then the knight is basically hanging, and my opponent would be pointing at this pawn. Okay, well, I understand that mistake. But instead they played c3, which was their third best move, and it gives them only a slight advantage, and I should castle now or play rook to c8. Just give up that pawn. Again, only in a couple of circumstances are they going to take that pawn. I can't understand how rook to c8 is my best move. Oh, because they can't take there because it's pinned. Okay. I remember during the game thinking that that was pinned. And I thought that that queen is kind of in an annoying place. So I played this, attacking the queen. But that turns out to be a blunder. Okay, that's a blunder because now they can take my knight with their queen. And that's what they did. And that's why I needed to play rook to c8. So when they did that, I could take here, and they couldn't take back because the pawn would be pinned by the rook. Okay, that's where it all went bad in this one. I think I understand that, but I'm not sure that I understand the best moves in all of those positions. Yeah, the engine is having trouble deciding between those two moves, but castling would have been wrong here. I guess if I had castled, then they could have doubled up on their rooks, and I would have been in big trouble down here in the corner. But I would have had to play g6. But if I had played g6, wouldn't they have played here? Wouldn't they have played h5? It says they wouldn't, but I think they would have. I don't know. But I have several other games to get to, so I'm just going to move on. This game is from June 26th, the following night. We ended up playing the 4 Knights game, Scotch variation. And according to the graph, my opponent ended up having a pretty big advantage, or developing a fairly decent advantage until about right here where they blundered it away. On the analysis tab, the advantage turns out to not be nearly as big as the game review thought, but still a slight advantage. They should have played bishop to f8 to chase away this knight. But instead, my opponent blundered here. Of course, there's only one move that takes advantage of that blunder, and that's taking this pawn, which is a fork of their king and their rook, which is what I did. So from here on out, I had an advantage. But quite a bit later in the game, I apparently gave my advantage away, according to the graph on the game review. And right here, I'm supposed to play a5. I'm not sure exactly why, other than to keep their pawn from coming forward. Or maybe it's to keep their king from being able to come around this way. I'm not entirely sure. I do know that my king is a little bit boxed in here. And one thing that I was looking at was this d-pawn that's locking their bishop in. So I thought if I played c3, if they took this, then I would just get their bishop. The problem with that is that right now the c-pawn is guarding this. I see this even before moving on. Okay, yeah, that's the problem there. I gave my opponent the advantage, or maybe brought it back to even. It says that brought us back to very near even because they could pin my rook to my king with this bishop to d3 because the pawn wasn't guarding that square anymore. Yeah, so I definitely have to watch out for these diagonals. My opponent also needs to look for those too. When a king and a rook or a queen and a king are lined up on the same diagonal or the same file, and you can attack it with a rook or a bishop, that sort of thing. So yeah, they definitely should have played bishop to d3 here. But instead, they saw the same thing that I saw, which was I was going after this pawn. Now, I suppose they should have realized that if I took this pawn, they could just take and they would be fine. That's what they should have realized. And then they could have looked around for a better move. But instead, I guess they thought if they took this pawn, I would get their bishop, so they should save the bishop. So both of us had a little bit of a glitch in our thinking here. So they tried to save their dark squared bishop according to the move list, which goes here. That gives me the advantage back. Still not a huge advantage. Here at this point, I did see the diagonal. I realized, oh no, they can pin my rook to my king and win that exchange. So I moved my king over, and that turns out to be my best move here, according to Stockfish. Again, it still says their best move is to go here. But here my opponent blundered it all away. Maybe they thought they were already lost, or maybe they were thinking that they had pinned this already or something, but they took there, which of course allows me to take the bishop. Not sure what their thinking was, but again, they had a glitch in their thinking or their board vision at this point. Maybe they were in desperate straits, I don't know. Or maybe they were just watching this pawn situation and thought, well, once I took this pawn, then they could take behind it, but didn't realize that my rook could just take their bishop. Of course, I did see their bishop, and my opponent resigned there, so I did get a win here. Still below 1200. Let's go on to the next one. This one is from June 27th. I played e4. My opponent played the Scandinavian defense. As you can see from the evaluation at the upper right, my opponent played with 94% accuracy. They had 0 mistakes, 0 misses, 0 blunders, and 0 inaccuracies. I only had 1 inaccuracy and 1 blunder. My opponent played like a 1900 and I played like a 1300. I resigned on move 14 because it went so poorly. It looks like my last move was the blunder, and I must have realized it because I resigned immediately there. Let's just go ahead and skip to that point. It wasn't my last move. It was my next to last move. Right here, my opponent has a minus 0.5 advantage already after 13 moves. I cannot take this bishop because my pawn is pinned. So I didn't take it. I thought if I moved it up, they would just get my bishop. Stockfish says I definitely should have moved it up. That is my best move by a significant factor. My second best move is knight to e1, which would protect that pawn. But that's not that good. And the next one, knight to g5, is just, that's not good at all. It says they wouldn't even take, even though, oh, well, my bishops and queen is guarding that square. So I guess that's why well, why wouldn't they take for a pawn? Even if I got it back, they would be ahead. But it says they wouldn't take if I played knight to g5. They would just play knight to d4, which would be attacking this unprotected bishop where they could fork my king and my queen. And once they did that, I would have to move my queen over to protect the bishop, and then they would take here. So that's if I played knight to g5, which I don't think I would ever play because they would just get my knight for a pawn, even though Stockfish says they wouldn't. They probably would. That seems like a silly move to me. But my best move is to give up the rook for the bishop. It says they would take it, and I would take back with the bishop, and I would just be down a little bit. But that's my best move here. How did I get myself in this situation? I don't know, but that's what I had to do, was give up the rook for the bishop. But instead, I moved my rook so I could move the pawn. But that allowed this. I moved my king over. Was that even my best move? Yeah, that was my best move. But moving my rook over was a blunder because it immediately took us to a mate in 10, according to Stockfish. So once they did that, I did play my best move. If I had moved the other way, it says if I had played king to f1, well, yeah, then that would have been mate, right? So I had to play this way. But they took that anyway. And it's a mate in 7 no matter what I do. My best move here is just to push my rook over there. And it says they wouldn't take. It says they would play bishop to d6. But yeah, I resigned after they took that pawn. This bishop's undefended. This pawn is defended, but very weakly, right? If they take this pawn and I take back with my knight, then that's mate with their queen on g2. So right here. That's the move that lost me the game, was getting my rook out of this danger because they already had this open. Okay, well, I don't think there's anything that can be done about that game. As I've said plenty of times, I'm not going to win very often if my opponent doesn't make any mistakes, not even an inaccuracy. After playing that one and losing it so quickly, I did play another one on the same night, June 27th, and it was this one. And this one again had the white pieces. And this time we played the French defense exchange variation. Again, I opened with e4, but instead of my opponent responding with e5 so I could practice the Vienna or knight to f3, they played e6, which I know to be the French. And I'm pretty sure Stockfish recommends d5 as the best response to that. Or I mean d4, and that's what most people play, I think, actually here and now. Stockfish is saying you don't really have to play that. You could play knight to f3 anyway. Or you could play c4. Oh, I didn't even think about c4. Because that would keep them from playing d5, wouldn't it? No, it says they would play d5 anyway, but then I would take it. And then they would take. And then I would take. What? And then I would have two d-pawns, but no c or e pawn. Okay. Well, I had heard that d4 was the best response to this, so I played d4. My opponent did play d5, which is the French defense, which I have not studied at all, because I was still trying to learn the Vienna and the four knights Scotch gambit or Scotch variation, whatever it's called, as well as the quiet game and the Italian and all the other things that can arise out of e4, e5. But I'm having very few opponents play e5, as you can see. But anyway, I went for the exchange variation, which Stockfish says is okay. I took there and they took back. And I did play knight to f3 here, again, trying to get pieces out and control center squares and castle. My opponent played knight to c6, which is okay. And I have no idea what the book move response is supposed to be here, but again, I was trying to castle, so I moved my bishop out, prepared to castle. My opponent moved a bishop out from the other side, and I did castle. And here they played f6. I'm pretty sure that's not good, but I didn't know. Stockfish, or the game review, says that is an inaccuracy, and I should play c4. Or rook to e1. Wait, it took it a while to figure out rook to e1. That's funny, because rook to e1's what I played. I saw that this and this are facing off, and oh, man, wouldn't that be cool if I could just move this out of the way and that would be check. But my opponent played g5. Apparently I can just take that. I had no idea. I took that and they took back. Then I would take, no, what? Took that and they took back. Oh, I would check with the bishop. And they can't block that. Yeah, they could. It says they wouldn't, but it says they would play king to d7. Why wouldn't they just block with the bishop? Oh, because then I could take the bishop, and then they'd have to move the king, and then I would check there with the queen, I think. Okay, I see that, I guess, but I didn't see it during the game. I went out there because, again, I was looking at this. They're not actually defending their light squared bishop, so I thought I could probably take it. But they went to defend the knight and the bishop at the same time by that queen move. Now, apparently, I'm supposed to line up here so I can kind of barrel through the center and pick up a bishop and a queen for my queen. That seems okay. Another good move is to go ahead and take this pawn like it had suggested earlier. It says if I took this pawn, my opponent would long castle. I think they would take back, but I have no idea. I played that instead, thinking I could come in here, and which would be a fork of these two pieces. My opponent is supposed to long castle here, but they played their second best move, which the computer counted as an inaccuracy. I thought that was a good move because it protects the knight over here and blocks this bishop from being pinned. So that bishop can move now. So I thought knight g to e7 wasn't bad. Again, Stockfish says I can take this pawn and they wouldn't take back. Knight to c3 is my best move. Well, I played my third best, which was to take the knight, but that was counted as a mistake. My opponent should have taken back with the queen, and I honestly expected them to. I thought they were going to take back with the queen so that I couldn't do this, and then I thought, maybe I would take this pawn, but then they would take the pawn. I wasn't sure how that was going to work out. I didn't think I was ahead here, but they took with the knight. And I did take that pawn, but it's not really a pawn fork because, again, they can just take this with their queen, which they did. But how am I up +2 here? I don't know. It's because I can chase the queen. That's what I played. They're supposed to drop back to d7 is their best move, but instead they went to d6, which is bad. It says good, but it's bad because I was up +2. Now I'm up +4. But I have to play knight to b5. I did not play knight to d5, or knight to e4, or queen to b3, which it also suggests. Queen to b3, because that bishop is pinned, I would be pointing at the bishop. Okay, I get that, but I played that, which is a pawn fork. Apparently, that took my advantage back to +2, but I mean, that's guarded by the pawn. It's guarded by my queen for that matter, and it forks those two pieces. My opponent's supposed to long castle, but instead they played g4. Well, I took the bishop, which points at their king and their queen. They basically have to take with their queen or they're going to lose it anyway, so they did. I took back with my pawn. I think I pre-moved that, and here I was pretty sure I was ahead. And they took my knight, which is a mistake because it allows mate in 1 right there. Do you think I found mate in 1 here? I've only used 1 minute of my time so far. I did not find mate in 1. I took that pawn with my queen, which is a miss. My opponent played that for some reason, which allows me to take here. And then they brought that rook over. I'm not sure why, because I did find mate in 1 this time. So that one worked out a lot better than the other game that night, but I'm still in the 1180s. Hopefully I will do better soon. And I probably will add some more analyses onto the end of this. Okay, this is my game from June 28th. I'm happy to report that I won it. You can see from the evaluation here that the computer thinks I played with a 91% accuracy, and the ratings estimator said I played like an 1800 while my opponent played like a 1400. We've had some discussions in the comments on my channel about how accurate those are and that they might be based on your actual ratings. So the lower rated you are, the bigger a boost it gives you on those. So if I was an actual 1800, I don't know if it would say if I played like an 1800 or not. But I did play the Caro-Kann defense. And the whole thing came down to one move. Here it says I didn't have any mistakes, misses, or blunders. My opponent had one mistake and one blunder. And it looks like the blunder is right there on that cliff in the graph. Okay, and it looks like that cliff came right after this point. The engine says my opponent has quite a few options that would work here. For example, they could take here with this bishop, which would be check, which would force me to take back. I would take back with my knight, not with my queen. And then instead of taking with their knight there and losing the knight for that, they would take over here with this knight. And I would take back. I would have an open file for the rook, but I would have doubled pawns and not want to castle to the king's side, and we would be about even. Another option for my opponent is to castle, of course, or to play c3, I guess protecting that pawn, and also opening a path for their queen out. Those are all the options that they could have had here. But I guess what my opponent saw is since I had blocked this check with my knight, that my queen no longer sees the rest of that file. Basically, my queen's blocked off from that. And I guess that they thought if they took here with this pawn that would open up their queen so that they would have 3 pieces hitting d7. I'm not sure, but I think the flaw in their thinking is that I also have 3 pieces defending d7 because my king is one of the defenders. So they probably wouldn't want to start attacking there after taking there. But that's what they played, and the engine says that's a blunder. At the time, I didn't know that was a blunder, but this was apparently the deciding moment of the entire game. There's only one move, according to the engine, that takes advantage of that blunder. And I'll give myself credit for spending some time here and finding that move. I think I spent something like 20 seconds on this move. That was queen to a5 check. That's because they can't block that check and defend this bishop at the same time. That was the problem with that. So backing up before that, okay, see, castling takes care of that problem because then I couldn't check out here. It would just be an empty threat on the bishop. c3 takes care of that problem too. And now it's not recommending, the engine isn't recommending taking with the bishop here now. The engine is recommending taking with the knight here now, which is interesting because it's not a check. It says if they took with the knight, I would just take back with the knight and then they would castle. I think if they took here and I had played queen to a5 check, they could probably block with the bishop or the queen. And then if I took this, we would still be even on material. Then they could take this knight over here and double the pawns right there. And that would probably be a problem for me. So the queen to a5 check thing only works because they didn't castle, they didn't block that diagonal, and they didn't take this with either one of their pieces. Okay, so that's the problem. But I'm glad I found this move, so I win that bishop. I knew that I was going up a piece here because there's not much they can do about it. Here they did play c3 to block the check, and I took the bishop. So I had 2 only moves in a row to take advantage of that blunder, and I found them. And that turned out to be the deciding moment in this game. Now, there was a point a little bit later, right here, where I was only up -4. I say only up -4. I'm not threatening mate or anything like that because they can stop it. For example, they can block the mate by putting their knight here. They can get out of the mate by moving their king over, which is actually what I thought they were going to do. When I brought over my other rook, so I have 2 rooks lined up here threatening checkmate, what I thought they were going to do was move their king over, so when I did check, they would have to move out. And it says at that point I wouldn't start trading off with their other rooks. I would bring my other rook down and put it right behind the first one. I'm not sure about that. They could have also gotten out of that by playing the g-pawn, so their king would have an escape square here. It wouldn't work if they went only 1 forward because once I got both rooks there, that would be mate. So it would work if they played g4, because then when I checked on h1, they could move forward, and if I checked on h2, they could move forward again. Oh no, they couldn't move forward again at that point. Interesting. Oh, okay, I see why the g-pawn works, because when I checked down there, they'd be able to sacrifice their queen for it. And it says I wouldn't even check down there at that point. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would have played g4 if I was them. It would have been bad. But here my opponent made another further mistake, which I would count that one as a blunder because it hangs mate in 1. As you saw, they had multiple ways to get out of the mate in 1. I was still ahead, but here I just checkmated. Okay, the following night, June 29th, I played this game. I had the white pieces again. This time the computer doesn't say I played perfectly like I did in the last one. I did have 3 mistakes, but I also had 2 great moves. My opponent had 3 mistakes and a miss. But it looks like the deciding moments in the game were right here, right about here. After 15 moves, we're about even. I did play the Ruy Lopez. Did I mention that? Which is something I haven't played intentionally in a rapid game. Ever, I don't think. But we got to this position after 15 moves. I'm supposed to play d3. which I guess makes sense. Both my queen and my knight would be hitting that spot, so they probably wouldn't try to take it at that point. It says if I did play that, though, they would put their knight in here and check me. And I would move over, and they wouldn't trade it for my bishop because my bishop hasn't developed yet. Now, my opponent probably would trade for my bishop at that point, but I don't know. It says it would be better for them to get their knight out over here, which would be attacking my queen, blocking this pawn, and would be a nice outpost square for their knight. So basically, that's the only reason that they should check and come in here. But that's if I play d3. If I play king to h1 now, which would also keep us very near even, then they should bring this back and threaten my queen, and I would just move over one. Or I could play h3, which also would keep us even, would attack the bishop. The computer says they wouldn't move it. I think my opponent probably would. They would probably at that point come back here and attack my queen. But Stockfish says if I played h3, they would play h5. And I guess I get that, because if I take there, then they could take back, their rook would be opened up down here to h1, and their queen would be available to come over before too long, maybe. But it says that's not what would happen. It says if I played this and they played h5, then I would just leave those pawns there, and then I would play d3. Well, I don't know about all that. The move that I did play was counted as a mistake, and that was knight to c4. It says it gives my opponent a slight advantage. Maybe that should have been counted as an inaccuracy, because we're still between +1 and -1. And now that I look at the board for just a second, I see what the problem with that is. My rook is trapped. They can immediately go up and exchange here. Wait, well then why wouldn't they have done that on the other moves that I was supposed to have made? If I had played to d3 like it said, why wouldn't they have played here bishop to e2? And I guess that would have been another reason to play king to h1, so that if they did play that, I could move my rook over. But if I played d3, they would still have this, right? They could still go up the exchange, but the bishop for the rook. That's I guess the problem with having the knight down here. Also, it's not recommending h3 anymore, but if I played h3, couldn't they still do this with their bishop and win the rook for the bishop? Wow, I should not have trapped my rook there, apparently. But yeah, for some reason, it's not saying that they would have done that. But after this, it's saying that they should definitely do that. And they would still have a slight advantage if they played queen to d5, which I guess pins the knight to the queen and aims here, threatening, not quite threatening mate because my knight guards that square, or bishop to e6, which would also pin the knight to my queen. But that's the top recommended move right here, is bishop to e2. And it says that I would play d3 at that point, which I should have played the previous move. And then they wouldn't take my rook, because my rook still can't move. And then they would play knight to e6. And then I would play knight to e3, I guess protecting the rook. I'm not understanding all the nuances of this position, so it's no wonder that I made a mistake, and it's no wonder that my opponent made a mistake as well. Now, they probably shouldn't have played here. It calls that a miss, but I think it maybe should have been called a blunder. I think it's calling it a miss because they missed this move, but I'm not sure here. I also wasn't sure about taking. It does turn out that that's my best move, and my only move that maintains any advantage here. It's not +3, it's +1.8, but I was worried that if I took here, they would take here, and then their queen, that my king would be opened, and their bishop and queen would be all pointed down, and it would be really bad. Because I thought, what if I took, and they took, and then I don't know, when I would do something else, but then they would bring their queen in, and it would be check, and I'd have to move over, and then that would, oh no, it still wouldn't be mate because my knight's guarding that square. Okay, but I did take, not sure if I was winning or not. And they are supposed to take, and they did, and my rook is still trapped. Now, according to Stockfish, there are several great ways out of here. One is to play knight to e3, which I'm not sure exactly what that does. I guess that adds a degree of protection to this and points at the rook. But I played the best one, which is knight to g3, because I didn't want them to take my rook with the bishop. I don't know if they were going to or not, but that might have been their plan, but I played there. And now again, they're supposed to bring it all the way back. But instead they played that, which, if you remember earlier, that was one of their better moves, but for some reason now it's not. Why is it not? Because they are threatening mate here. Well, the problem with that is that they quit defending their bishop, and my queen's pointed right at it, which I didn't see before this turn, but at that point, when they moved their queen, I realized, wait, nothing's protecting their bishop, so I took it. That turned out to be my best move, and I'm up +3 now. They did get my knight out of that deal, which, after I took the bishop, I realized, oh, my knight's undefended. And I finally played d3. It wasn't quite my best move at that point, but I did see it would be defended by my queen. It would win a slight tempo. There are a whole bunch of different moves listed for their queen. They played one that's not listed there, which is to move over 1. And it says that's fine, but now nothing's protecting this square, now that the queen's off that diagonal, and they still haven't castled. That's one reason I've been learning to castle as early as it's safe to castle, because I've noticed that if I can castle and my opponent doesn't, then often their king becomes vulnerable, and also this rook hasn't moved yet. So I went in there and checked, and because my queen cuts off those squares, they can only move sideways. And either way, it kind of does limit that rook's movement. They chose the better of those two paths. This allows me to get another tempo, which I did. I brought the bishop out because I'd been waiting to develop all my pieces. They were down here attacking, and I hadn't had a chance to get all my pieces out. So here on move 22, I developed my last minor piece, but it comes with the tempo because it's attacking the queen. It does give up this pawn, which they should not take. Because if they take, which my opponent did, and that's counted as a mistake, but I think it should be a blunder, because you'll see the evaluation went from +3.5 to +8, and that's because I can check. I don't remember what my reasoning was to choose between the two rooks. Interestingly, the computer says rook a to c1 is also really good here. Okay, it turns out it wouldn't have mattered which rook I checked with, but I do remember considering which rook to check with, and I chose the a rook. Maybe because it was my only piece that hadn't moved yet, and there my opponent resigned because they're about to lose their queen. Interestingly enough, according to Stockfish, the only move that doesn't lead directly to a mating sequence is rook to a3. That leaves me with a +9.5 advantage, protecting their queen this way. Any other move, like if they traded here, that leads directly to a mating sequence. But if they played rook to a3, that would have saved them. But they resigned here, so I won this one. Good for me. And after I won that one, my rapid rating was at 1197. So in my next game, I was really hoping that I could win, because that would put me over 1200. But I had just won 3 in a row, as you've seen. So I wasn't really confident about it. But let's take a look. If you've gotten used to reading these new graphs on chess.com, you've probably realized already that I did win this game. So I got back up above 1200 for the first time in a while. A few weeks, I'm not sure exactly how long it's been. I'm surprised that my accuracy rating is this high, 83%, because the game review does say I had 2 mistakes and 2 misses, not to mention 3 inaccuracies. But I had 3 great moves, so apparently that bumps it up a little bit. My opponent played d4 in this game, so we didn't end up with the Caro-Kann defense. We ended up with the Queen's Gambit. With the Queen's Gambit declined, and I think maybe it went into the Catalan or something like that, whatever it's called. But it looks like, despite me having an advantage through a bunch of the middle game, I gave most of it away all the way up until about right there. Gave my opponent an advantage right near the end, but then they gave it right back. So let's go take a look at exactly that moment. Apparently, me moving my rook up here was a mistake. I had an advantage, and I had whittled it away unknowingly at this point, even though I'm up 3 points of material. My opponent can get back the advantage here, it says, by playing knight to g6. Well, I wasn't worried about my opponent playing knight to g6. Oh, but I should have been because this pawn's pinned. Oh, wow. My opponent probably got a message at the end, if they ran the game review, that said they should study pins or skewers or something. Because if you do run the game review, down at the end it suggests training and lessons for you, practice, and pins is probably what they needed to see here, that this pawn can't move. So they would have been safe moving their knight here. That would have not only threatened my rook, but both their rook and their queen would be pointed at f7. Wouldn't quite be in danger of mate, but I would be really close to it. I don't know how I would have gotten out of that if they had played that. If they had played this and I would have tried to take with the pawn and realized, oh no, I can't, it's pinned, then I would have, it says played rook to e6 at that point. Okay, that would have blocked the queen from seeing the pawn. But then they could have checked here, and it would have been locked in with that pawn. And my rook would be trapped on the other side of the knight, between my pawn and the knight. Okay, so I guess I do see why that's a mistake. Stockfish seems to think I could get out of it. It's between +1 and -1, so about even. But my opponent didn't see that. They also didn't see their second best move, which would have been to keep advancing their c-pawn. They have 2 connected passed pawns here. I was a little bit worried about that. That's why during the game I was leery of counting myself as ahead, even though I am up 3 points of material, because they have these 2 connected passed pawns. I think obviously the reason I moved this rook up here was to attack this one, so it kind of makes sense that they would have seen that and advanced it. Then I'm not sure what I would have done. It says if they had advanced it, then I would have played queen to a3. I don't know if I would have or not. I might have come back down here to start hitting those pawns. But it said I would have played queen to a3 at that point. I have passed pawns also, but they're stacked up behind each other and blocked by this queen. So maybe that's why that's a good idea to kind of ask for a queen trade. And then I would have connected passed pawns. My opponent's next best move is knight to e2, which is just to drop this back. And I'm not sure what that would accomplish exactly. But both of those last 2 would still leave me with a very slight advantage if I played correctly. But instead my opponent got behind the c-pawn, which I understand they're thinking. I had just attacked it. But now they've gotten behind it, so it's defended. They could have defended it by moving, but they didn't think of that. So they defended it, and I'm back to a -2 advantage here. Oh good, it says queen to a3 is my best move again. Well, this time I played it. And of course I am thinking they have 2 passed pawns. One of them's only 2 squares from promotion. I've only got 1 piece defending this back rank now, but I have 2 passed pawns. So if they take, I've got 2 passed pawns here. And Stockfish says their best move is to take. I'm surprised by that. It says if they took, of course, I would take with my b-pawn. Then I would have undoubled my pawns, and then they would play c6. Well, what would I do at that point? Oh, I could advance again. And then they would play king to f2? Really? Why would they play that? Because then wouldn't I promote? It says I wouldn't. That's weird. I would have thought I would have promoted, and when they took, I would get with my rook. Oh, but then they would have these two that I would have to take care of at that point. That would have gotten really complicated. I might have lost that. I wanted them to take, but they didn't. They went back there. Interestingly, Stockfish says here, one of my best moves is to take the c-pawn with this rook. I don't know that I would have, because it looks like that just gives up my rook for a pawn. That's my best move. I did not see that. I saw my second best move, which was to check over here, taking another pawn. So now I'm up 4 points of material. And now I have 2 pieces pointed right here. Oh, that's why it would have worked the other way. Okay, I get it now. If I had taken here and they had taken, then I still would have checked here and I would have ended up winning the rook either way. Okay. So that's why the 2 ratings for those 2 moves are about even. Okay, well, that's what I played. My opponent, of course, has to get out of check. They didn't choose they didn't choose their best move, but it's still pretty close. And then I took that. The engine says it doesn't seem to matter that much whether they just move over or trade rooks with me here. They traded rooks with me here. And now, of course, I'm attacking this pawn, but it's protected by their queen. It is their best move to move it, which they did, but now I can get behind it with my rook, or in front of it, as the case may be, which I did. They played their best move. I don't understand why that was their best move. Is that because it aims at this pawn? Is it because I am not sure why that's their best move at all. I didn't play one of my top moves here. I dropped my queen back thinking I want to get rid of this pawn so I can use my rook for stuff. Now Stockfish says their best move is to play queen to d4, queen to e3, or even queen to d5 are all about the same. Wow. I think if they had played queen to d5, I just would have taken it. Oh, that's dropped off the list now. And Stockfish is still thinking about what their best move is. It thinks maybe king to f2 is their best move. And b3 it would be my follow-up. But instead they took my b pawn, so I can't play b3 as my follow-up. But now I can play e3 check. That's why king to f2 was such a good move, because I can move this pawn and that's check. And I saw that. Turns out that's my best move. Oh, now we're at minus 30. Here, the game review is doing the opposite of what it normally does. The analysis board says it's actually much better for me than the game review thought it was at this point. They did play their best move. And of course, I was going to take this pawn anyway, so now it comes with check, and now their queen's not defending it. So after they got out of check, I check down here, which of course now I'm defending this pawn's push, and I'm threatening their queen, kind of forcing a queen trade here. They did take my queen, and I pre-moved the taking back of it, because they can't stop that pawn, and now it's mate and 8. So I'm up above 1200. I'm going to end this video now. By the time you see it, it'll probably be a few days old, but I'm pretty happy. I've won 4 in a row. I know statistically I probably won't win the next one, but I might. I think I'm finally getting a hang of some of those e4 openings as white, and I'm doing pretty good with the black pieces too. So thank you for spending your time here. Hopefully you learned something, and let's all get better at chess together. I'll see you next time.